or not, week 12 on the waiver wire in fantasy football might actually be the most important one of the entire season. Now, typically that's usually in the beginning of the year when we don't have a lot of information, but there was just so many injuries and breakout performances in week 11, which makes week 12 a really massive waiver wire. So in this video, we're going to break down the 10 players that you need to add before your friends do. Now, the first one should be rather obvious at this point based on the news that's coming out and what happened on Sunday in week 11, but it's Emmanuel Wilson of the Green Bay Packers, because he's not only one of the most important handcuffs and has been the past month or so of the season since Josh Jacobs has been dealing with a calf injury, but now Emmanuel Wilson is like one of the biggest ads of the entire season, if not the biggest waiver ad of the entire season right now, because Josh Jacobs is going to undergo more tests on Monday. It is Monday as I record this, and as of right now, he's not expected to miss the season with a knee injury, but he's expected to miss some time, potentially 2 to 6 weeks. As of the time of recording this, he's not on IR or anything like that, but that's also a possibility. You can see right here that Jacobs was able to return to the game briefly after jamming his knee into the MetLife turf before leaving for good. There's optimism that he'll be back soon, but again, soon is probably meaning like a couple of weeks, at least 2 to 3 weeks from now, which means Emmanuel Wilson right now is in the driver's seat in a good Packers offense, not great, but a good Packers offense to get all the touches. Because that's what we just saw this past weekend. Assuming they don't sign somebody, which I don't think they will based on the depth that they have, Emmanuel Wilson led this backfield 11 carries, 40 yards, had an 11-yard touchdown in this game. He had a 2-point conversion late in the game, which really mattered to put the Packers up by 7. And as you can see right here, according to Ryan Heath over on Twitter, Josh Jacobs left the game in the second quarter with that knee injury. From that point on, so an entire half plus of football, Emmanuel Wilson received every backfield touch, including 11 rush attempts, a target, and a carry from inside the 5-yard line. Also the 2-point conversion that doesn't go down as a touch, it just goes down as a pass or fail pretty much. So right now it looks like, yes, Christopher Brooks is there. He's going to now be probably the backup. Yes, they have Marshawn Lloyd, who apparently is close to coming back from IR, though he's really never had any snaps in the NFL in 2 years now due to injuries. But by all accounts, this backfield looks like it's going to be Emmanuel Wilson's. He has the size. He's a talented runner. If you're not familiar with Emmanuel Wilson, he's now been on this team for a couple of years, a former undrafted pick back in 2023, really made his way onto the team because he had a preseason game of like 100 yards, multiple touchdowns, and at every single stop when he was asked to do stuff, he looked good. He's 226 pounds. In terms of his college background, you could see it if we scroll down here. He was a talented college runner who was able to just basically do what he just did for the Packers this past week. Pass protect, be reliable, not fumble, and he was definitely a red zone back. Ultimately, once Josh Jacobs left that game in week 11, here is the opportunity share and all the usage that Emmanuel Wilson saw. He played over 90% of the snaps, ran 70% of the routes, and handled 92% of the opportunities. I mean, those are some insane numbers. Just getting anywhere near 70% routes as a running back or 90+% of the snaps in a game that was pretty close the entire time is insane. If he sees anywhere near that moving forward, he's going to be a weekly like top 12 RB. And if you look at the Packers schedule for these next couple of weeks, like it's not anything great. At home against the Vikings, then Thanksgiving against the Lions, but it's not terrible matchups. And if Jacobs was to forced to miss more time, that's when you get a couple of matchups against the Bears that can come into play. So we'll see what happens. But for these next couple of weeks, at home against the Vikings, and then a short week on Thursday night against the Lions, odds are Jacobs misses both of those games because of the short week. And I'm going to be starting Emmanuel Wilson at the very minimum as a flex play or RB2. Now, I mentioned this is a massive week on the waiver wire because, yeah, Wilson is 92% available, and this next guy is available in over 60% of fantasy leagues right now, and that's Michael Wilson, another Wilson here, because look, the Arizona Cardinals wide receiver in a game where we got news heading into this that Marvin Harrison was going to be out Sunday against the 49ers and potentially moving forward more weeks, and that's important for future fantasy performances for Michael Wilson. In that game, we got that news. It was like, okay, who's going to step up as the new wide receiver 1? There's no Marvin Harrison. There's no Zay Jones, who's on IR. There's no Semi Nfoku, who's on IR. Yes, that's a wide receiver in the NFL. Well, it was the last man standing, the third-year player out of Stanford in Michael Wilson, who, man, oh man, this guy looked legit. 15 catches, 185 yards. Do you know how hard it is in a fantasy football PPR format to score 30 fantasy points without scoring a touchdown? That's what Michael Wilson just did. He had like 34 fantasy points, 18 targets. Yes, Trey McBride was involved, 10 catches, 115 yards and a touchdown because we know Trey McBride is great, but Michael Wilson was by far and away the favorite target of Jacoby Brissett, not just for this game, but any game this entire season. Look at this stat right here by Ryan Heath. In Marvin Harrison's absence, Michael Wilson not only put up 185 yards, but put up a 31.6% target share. He earned 32% of the targets in that game. Marvin Harrison has only exceeded a 30% target share twice in his entire career and doesn't have 100 yards in a game this season. Now, obviously, that's just kind of like a contrast, like this guy versus that guy, but it just goes to show you that Marvin Harrison has some flaws to his profile despite being a top 10 overall pick. We know this, but Michael Wilson comes right in. He's reliable. Jacoby Brissett just kept hammering him with targets. And there's a world where that happens again because the Cardinals defense stinks. They have to keep passing the ball. Jacoby Brissett literally just completed 47 passes this past week. Believe it or not, that was the most in NFL history, completing completing 47 of 57 passes. So yes, with Kyler Murray still expected to miss probably the rest of the season since this Cardinals team isn't going to the playoffs, Jacoby Brissett is going to go in there week in and week out. He's been a top 10 fantasy quarterback since taking over, not because he's like elite, but because he's functional and good enough, especially throwing downfield. And with a bad defense, you got to throw 40 times a game. That's going to lead to fantasy goodness for your tight ends and wide receivers. So yes, moving forward, Michael Wilson, like if Marvin Harrison, even if he does come back in week 12, although it seems unlikely because this appendicitis apparently could take multiple weeks to heal from, the stitches and just everything in terms of the core strength. So Marvin Harrison, if he misses, Michael Wilson is a must-start pick up and play wide receiver. Even if he's back, you might still see Michael Wilson start to become a favorite or a more favored target with less defensive attention since Harrison is out there for Jacoby Brissett throwing him the rock. Now, the good waiver wire ads don't stop there. Like most weeks, the fact that you get a workhorse running back in Emmanuel Wilson and a legit potential #1 wide receiver coming off of one of the best performances, the best yardage performance of a wide receiver this year, the fact that you get that in the same week is like already hands down probably the best fantasy waiver wire ad week of the season. But then you also get Christian Watson, who's available in 70% of fantasy leagues right now, and he's also the wide receiver one, it looks like, for his team right now, by far the most trusted and playmaking wide receiver on a Packers offense that, again, is not great, but it is definitely quality and good. 4 catches, 46 yards, multiple touchdowns, big play in the right corner of the end zone for a touchdown late in that game as well to put them up by a touchdown after the 2-point conversion. But more importantly, Christian Watson, who is still just a month removed from returning from a torn ACL that he suffered not last year, this past January, he's already back to leading the team, running 80% of the routes, earning a 23% target share. Yes, Romeo Doubs continues to be the #1 receiver. Yes, he had 2 bad drops this past game. I don't think that's going to change his usage. They need him out there with Tucker Kraft done, a bunch of other receivers, including Jaden Reed, still banged up. So Romeo Doubs is going to remain involved, but outside of that, like your best playmaking option, whether it's end arounds, whether it's crossing routes, whether it's downfield usage, is going to be Christian Watson. The concern in his rookie year and sometimes in the past was, will he catch those balls? So far this season, and most of last season when healthy, he's catching those balls. So when I look at this on a week in and week out basis, like, yes, I do believe Romeo Doubs, as he has for the past 6 to 7 weeks, is going to keep seeing 7+ targets a game. But Matthew Golden doesn't appear to be breaking out anytime soon. Dontavian Wicks doesn't appear to be breaking out anytime soon, just continues to drop balls in crucial moments like he did against the Eagles last week. Maybe Jaden Reed, who they're saying could return in week 13, maybe he returns in 2 weeks, but even then, you still get a couple more weeks of some potential wide receiver one downfield usage out of Christian Watson for a guy whose role is only expanding and gaining more trust with the coaching staff and this quarterback, and it's happening at the perfect time. Because in the fantasy postseason, the Packers get, entering the postseason, the Bears, bottom 5 secondary. In the fantasy postseason, the Bears and Ravens, bottom 10 secondary. So maybe Jaden Reed's back then, and it kind of mucks this up a little bit. But if you're talking about Jordan Love, who just loves throwing the ball 20+ yards downfield, leads the entire NFL in attempts of downfield targets this year and also downfield efficiency. Now you combine that with Christian Watson's speed and jump ball and contested catchability. Yes, you want to be adding this guy in all your leagues, and yes, you can start him moving forward. Now, before we get into the next player, let me just ask you something. Can you relate to this? Like every Sunday in one of your group chats, somebody says, I knew that guy was going to go off. Well, why don't you prove it? Because now you can. I've teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6, and this is exactly where you could put your football knowledge to the test to actually cash out. All right, now here's how it works. All you have to do is pick more or less on player stats, whether it's passing yards, touchdowns, receptions, and when your calls are right, you cash out. It's pretty simple. There's no complicated rules. You have to combine at least 2 or more player stats together on DraftKings Pick 6, and then you just watch your players perform. Okay, now this next part is pretty huge, so make sure you pay attention. Because new DraftKings customers, when you play $5 or more, you get $50 in Pick 6 credit. So simply put, you play at least $5 if you're a new customer to DraftKings, and there'll be an extra $50 in credits in your Pick 6 account. Pretty cool. So to get in on the action, make sure you download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now using my promo code SAL. Ride the upside and let your picks do the talking for you. In partnership with DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. All right, so you have like 2 legit #1 potential wide receivers for their teams and a workhorse in Emmanuel Wilson, but it continues to go this week on the waiver wire because Kenneth Gainwell is still available in over 70% of leagues. And maybe Kenneth Gainwell to you is like, roll your eyes, Kenneth Gainwell. We've been here before. This has happened before. I add Kenneth Gainwell. He gets no points. Jaylen Warren becomes the workhorse running back once again. I understand that, but very quietly this past week, Jaylen Warren suffered an injury. You can see that injury right here. According to David Chow, Dr. Chow on Twitter, he says, looks bad, but unfortunately not. But fortunately not. Oh, fortunately not, of course. Inversion left ankle. He's back already. So here's the deal. He ended up rolling his ankle. It was on the inside of it, so it's not as bad. The thing with this, though, is that he was able to return to the game, but then he left the game again, and then we didn't see him late in that game, and instead it was Kenneth Gainwell scoring his 2nd touchdown of the day in the receiving department. Now, with ankle injuries, injuries, there's a good chance Warren could just play in week 12. We'll see the practice reports, but there's a chance that this thing swells up. It gets sore. It bruises. He's not practicing. Maybe he misses a week. That's where Kenneth Gainwell becomes important, because we've now seen 2 games where either Jaylen Warren didn't play or got hurt. The first game was, months ago at this point against the Vikings overseas. Gainwell was ruled out kind of last minute. Warren, 99 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground. Oh yeah, catches 6 balls for 35 yards, scores 30 fantasy points. This past week, Warren has only 9 carries for 24 yards, but don't stop there. Led the team with 7 catches, 81 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Oh yeah, for the second straight time when Jaylen Warren was hurt, Kenneth Gainwell came in and had 30 fantasy points. So I mean, at this point alone, it's like, yeah, we kind of have to have this guy rostered, especially since maybe there are some questions about the health. Even if Warren plays, is he 100% heading into this week 12 matchup against the Chicago Bears, who have literally a bottom 10 defense? And then you have the Bills, who have been struggling to defend the run. We just saw Sean Tucker dominate them this past week, and even Rachaad White averaged 5 yards per carry. And oh yeah, then they face the Ravens bottom 10 defense and the Dolphins bottom 5 run defense. So this next month of the season, if Warren was to be limited or miss any time at all, or even if like in week 14, if you're dealing with some bye week issues, that's where you can put Kenneth Gainwell, and he is an appealing player. Let's keep going. Let's not stop there, because we have another starting running back on the waiver wires in this week. This is all happening in the same week, which is insane. And that starting running back is Chris Rodriguez, because we were getting some whispers and rumors of the Commanders wanting to change up their backfield. And in Madrid, Spain, in the overseas game in the morning in week 11 on Sunday, that's what happened. 15 carries for Chris Rodriguez, 79 yards. He added a reception as well. He averages over 5 yards per touch in this game, and he commanded the backfield 45% of the snaps, 47% of the rush attempts, both season highs for Chris Rodriguez. Meanwhile, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, only 28% of the backfield carries. That was his lowest in a game since week 2. Week 2 on Thursday Night Football on a short week when he was just in his second ever NFL game, and Austin Eckler started that week. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt has been trending down slowly. Chris Rodriguez has been trending up slowly. Now, we can't get too worked up about this because 3 running backs still played at least 25% of the snaps in this game. All 3 running backs saw at least 6 opportunities, so it is still a messy 3-headed backfield and not a great offense. We have to keep that in mind, but again, we're entering week 12 of the fantasy season. If you're getting a running back that is seeing 15 touches in the goal line and red zone opportunities, that guy needs to be rostered and is playable. Moving forward, you're going to get tough matchups against the Broncos, somewhat tough matchups against the Vikings coming up for the Commanders, but then you get some nice matchups. Entering the fantasy postseason, you get the Giants. That's a bottom 3 run defense. You get the Cowboys, a bottom 3 run defense. So there are some spots where maybe you could flex Chris Rodriguez, and honestly, just pick him up. He's better than having a backup tight end or a backup running back or a second defense or a backup quarterback or a second defense on your bench, because you just don't want your potential competition in the fantasy playoffs to start Chris Rodriguez at home against the Cowboys on Christmas Day, and then Chris Rodriguez goes out there and has like 50 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns against you. You might as well just pick him up. And you should also pick up Sean Tucker, because somehow this week 12 waiver wire just gets even better. Like, I get it, Bucky Irving could return this week. I understand all that, although I don't think he will be 100% healthy for probably another 2 to 3 weeks and ramped up fully, which is why Sean Tucker is very appealing. He's very appealing because of that fact that Bucky Irving won't be healthy, and this past week he took the RB2 job, in my opinion, away from Rachaad White. 19 carries, 106 yards. Despite the Bucs trailing in this game, they just kept giving it to him because he was averaging 5.6 yards per touch. Oh, don't stop there. Was a playmaker in the passing game as well. 2 catches, 34 yards, and a touchdown. This reminds me of last year where he had multiple touchdowns, where he had like 200 total yards against the Saints. When this guy, Sean Tucker, out of Syracuse, dropped in the draft, I think went undrafted because of some health concerns, when he gets opportunities, he literally dominates. In this game, he didn't start. He didn't get much usage in the first quarter, but as you can see from Ryan Heat's tweet right here, after Sean Tucker ripped off a 43-yard touchdown run down the right sideline in the second quarter, he outtouched Rachaad White 12-2 the rest of the game. Overall, that worked out to Sean Tucker seeing 59% of the rush attempts to just 28% for Rachaad White. Now, as I mentioned, we could be getting Bucky Irving back this week. Bucky Irving practiced in limited fashion Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Entering week 11 was ultimately ruled out. There's still a chance he misses week 12, but even if he does play, are we really going to think a guy who's been out for the past 2 months with a serious, multiple different injuries, right? Do we really think he's just going to come back and see 20 plus opportunities? Maybe, but after the week that we just saw from Sean Tucker, if Bucky Irving was to suit up this week, I would not doubt a split backfield with Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker's going to have a tough matchup this week against the Rams, but then it gets easy. At home against the Cardinals, at home against the Saints, at home against the Falcons, matchups against the Panthers and Dolphins in the fantasy playoffs. He might not be relevant by that time if Bucky Irving is 100% healthy, but that is a big if for a running back who's missed multiple games last year with injury or was banged up and has now missed 2 games this year. An undersized franchise running back in Bucky Irving coming off of a long layoff. Sean Tucker should be involved at least for the next few weeks and should be added in most 12-team leagues. And Zonovan Knight is at least worth a look because there was a lot of things that kind of went into this past week for Zonovan Knight. The first thing is that Emari Demercado left with an ankle injury, did not return. If you're not returning as a running back with an ankle injury, there's probably a good chance you're missing the next week in week 12. Okay, so there's that. This led Bam Knight to have 5 carries, 24 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. He ended up adding 4 catches for 21 yards. So he ends up having a nice fantasy outing, 15 or so fantasy points with that touchdown. Now you see 5 carries and you're like, that's gross, but they were trailing pretty much the entire game by multiple scores, 2 or 3 scores, especially in the third and fourth quarter. So they didn't really run the ball. They were throwing the ball. 47 attempts or completions for Jacoby Brissett, NFL record, hence why. But in this game, you saw Michael Carter, because they were down by so much and he's more so the pass catching running back, actually led the team with 44% of the snaps. But don't let this fool you. It was Zonovan Knight leading the backfield with 36% of the carries. He also had 4 catches. And with Emari Demercado banged up in this game, you're probably going to get a backfield moving forward of Michael Carter, Zonovan Knight. Zonovan Knight, we've already seen this backfield combination earlier in the year. Zonovan Knight leads as the early down back and red zone back. Now, this is all assuming that Trey Benson does not return in week 12. He was eligible to return in, I believe, week 10. He's still been banged up, dealing with injuries. Now, there is a chance that he returns, but we haven't even seen him come off IR yet. Usually when a player comes off on IR, that means they have 21 days to return to the team. That means they have a couple of weeks to practice if they wanted to. Typically, it's rare like a guy comes off IR and just plays like 3 or 4 days later. So we have to see if Trey Benson can even practice this week, and if he does, is he practicing in full? If he's not, well, it looks like Zonovan Knight could be a fill-in for you for week 12 if you're dealing with any bye week issues. Maybe you have Devon Achane on bye and you have to put in Zonovan Knight. He's the only thing on your waiver wire. It could be worse, especially considering the matchup, because he's going to be at home against the Jaguars in a game that might actually stay close for the Cardinals, so that looks good. And then moving forward, some other beneficial matchups. Tampa Bay on the road, you might get some pass catching opportunities, although I probably think Benson would be back by week 13. But at least for this next week, track the injury report for Trey Benson. If he's out, and it looks like Emari Demercado could be missing with that ankle injury, looks like Zonovan Knight could be a 1-week fill-in for you. All right, so we're talking about a bunch of different players in this video, but if you want to see my #1 waiver wire ad at every single position for this week, I built a guide completely free for you. You could check it out with the link in the description below to get it, or you can just head to waiverwins.com. That is waiverwins.com. You type it into your device, you enter your email, I send it to you. If you don't see it, just check your spam and promotional folders. Okay, next up, let's talk about Baishal Tutin, because believe it or not, he's still available in over 50% of leagues. I got a fly in my face right now, and he is one of the most interesting stashes or pickups in fantasy football. And let's talk about this right now. Baishal Tutin this past week, 15 carries, 74 yards, had a touchdown compared to 19 carries for Travis Etienne. But the interesting thing was, like, you might look at this game and go, oh, the Jaguars won 35-6. He got blowout run in this game. They were commanding the entire time. Justin Herbert didn't even play in the fourth quarter because he was banged up and it was a blowout. Not the case. Baishal Tutin was involved early and often in this game. In fact, as you can see from this tweet from Ryan Heath right here, he says that Baishal Tutin actually outcarried Travis Etienne 8-6 in the first half with them splitting goal line carries. So it looks like Baishal Tutin was getting more involved. The problem was he left this game with an injury, did not return. Maybe part of the reason he didn't return was, well, maybe he was actually hurt, but that's probably part of it. The other part is because they were up by like 30 points. Why put him back in? So at the end of the day, he ended up only playing 32% of the snaps, only seeing 33% of the rush attempts, but that factors in him getting hurt and missing basically the entire final quarter of this game. But he looked really good in this game. He had multiple explosive runs. I still think Travis Etienne is the RB1 on this team, but I wouldn't be shocked if Baishal Tutin, assuming this is not a serious injury, as of this recording, we don't have an update on that, but if he's not going to miss any time, I wouldn't be shocked if moving forward, he's basically locked into seeing a dozen or so touches per game, because the Jaguars, since the Travis Hunter injury, since Brian Thomas injury, they basically changed their entire offense to being a run-first team. Check this out. You can see this tweet from Hayden Winks. He says, basically, this is a tweet of a chart he made, I believe, from Underdog. It says 2025 RB fantasy usage by team from weeks 8 through 11. So that month of the season, the Jaguars are by far and away #1 in RB usage. Number 2 is the Dolphins. Number 3 is the Rams. Number 4 is the Lions. Some other teams that you expect up there. Number 1 is the Jaguars, since all these injuries to their wide receiver room and them having to shift their offense. Liam Cohen has done it. Liam Cohen did it last year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, running an efficient rush offense. We're seeing it again right now, very quietly. Both Etienne and Baishal Tutin are trending up. And so is Devin Singletary pretty quietly as well, because he just continues to be involved in this Giants offense that, despite whoever their coach is, despite whoever their quarterback is, keeps moving the ball and scoring points. This past week, Tyron Tracy, season high 19 carries, season high 88 rushing yards, but it was Devin Singletary who also saw a season high 16 carries, had multiple touchdowns, because yet again in this game, Tyron Tracy did not see a carry inside the 5-yard line, was not on the field in the red zone. Even on the drives where Tyron Tracy would get 40 yards and get to the red zone, they take him off the field field and put in Devin Singletary, because whether it's Brian Daboll, whether it's Mike Kafka, whoever the coach is, they trust, as of right now, Devin Singletary more in the red zone. So Tyron Tracy is the running back I want to have here. He's the more explosive player. He's the better pass catcher. He put up nearly 150 total yards this past week. But Singletary, if he's going to be involved and get these red zone carries, and this offense is going to move the ball, and when Jackson Dart comes back, the reports are that they don't want him running the ball nearly as much. That could lead to more red zone touches and touchdowns for Singletary. He could be a flex option for you, or a handcuff, or both. I also want to talk about Darnell Mooney, but also just kind of a time to talk about the entire Falcons passing attack moving forward, because as of right now, it looks like Drake London is going to be out for at least week 12 with a PCL sprain. It's a similar injury that is expected from Josh Jacobs, and it really just depends on the severity. This could be a 2-week, it could be a 6-week injury, so this is going to matter for at least the next 1 or 2 weeks. We're not going to have Drake London. Now, I think in general, since Michael Penix is also hurt, it's going to be Kirk Cousins. That could lead to some gross things. But let's not forget, Mooney last year, largely with Kirk Cousins, went out there and had a career year pretty much, or at least he rejuvenated his career from his first year with the Bears. 992 yards, basically a 1,000-yard season, 107 targets, by far most of which, outside of like 5 or 6, were from Kirk Cousins last year. So if for the next 1 to 2 weeks, it's going to be Kirk Cousins throwing to Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney, Casey Washington, KhaDarel Hodge, all these guys. Sure, in your deeper leagues, you could pick up KhaDarel Hodge, but Mooney, who's available in over 60% of leagues, is the priority. Another situation we have to talk about, especially for your deeper leagues, is Calvin Ridley, because he finally returned. The 30-plus-year-old wide receiver from a hamstring injury. In his first game back from a hamstring, he broke his fibula and is done for the year, which absolutely stinks. But also in this game, Jameer Deke, a rookie wide receiver, left with a concussion, didn't return. He's now questionable to maybe doubtful for week 12. And Alec Imanor also got hurt, but he was able to return to the game. So let's just assume Jameer Deke doesn't play next week. I do think, by the way, even though he got concussed, Jameer Deke is probably the wide receiver I want most on this team rest of season. But in terms of for week 12, Alec Imanor is going to be out there. And then who? Van Jefferson, who saw some nice targets this past week. This is a gross team. I would say maybe the biggest add out of all is going to be, if you need tight end help, Chig Okonkwo this week. Like if you really need a tight end help, you could pick up Chig Okonkwo, because somebody has to get more involved in this offense. Van Jefferson ran 93% of the routes this past week. 84% went to Alec Imanor, but everything's gross. The offensive line, Cam Ward, the pass catchers, like sure, if you're in a bind, maybe you get 40 or 50 yards and a touchdown from one of these wide receivers. I would rank it right now for rest of season, Jameer Deke, Alec Imanor, Van Jefferson, in terms of how I'm adding these guys in your deeper leagues. And also just your weekly reminder from me, Sal Vetri, to add Tyler Algier, because he's somehow still available in over 55% of leagues. And even though this week he only had 3 carries for 10 yards and it was the Bijan show for 23 carries, multiple touchdowns, and 104 yards, we know that Tyler Algier is maybe the best handcuff in fantasy football. At worst, a top 3 handcuff in fantasy football. We've seen him now score, I think, 6 or 7 touchdowns so far this season, so he's also a flex option for you. I don't have to beat a dead horse here. Tyler Algier needs to be added. And a reminder that Jayden Reed, who could return in week 13, should also be rostered and added in your leagues. It's even more important now that, Packers are dealing with so many injuries to Tucker Kraft, to all their depth wide receivers, now to Josh Jacobs, so the passing attack might need more help these next few weeks if Jayden Reed was to return. And a reminder that his last 2 years in fantasy football, he's been a quality wide receiver. Rookie year, 13.6 points per game. Last year, 12.6 points per game, despite leaving some games early with injuries and battling injuries there as well. So Jayden Reed is somebody you should consider stashing. So these are the players you need to add in your fantasy football league before your friends do. Now, also, we broke down the biggest takeaways from week 11 of fantasy football that will impact week 12 and the rest of the season. Make sure to check out these key takeaways. We're talking about how offenses are changing, how injuries are impacting some teams. Check out that video that dropped on Monday. I think it's also going to help you out a ton.